as these meetings take place, gradually this whole form, obviously only as an apparent thing, in the mind, so to speak, if you can imagine this, the whole form, this point here will gradually move here and round like this. And in 1200 years, 1199 to be exact, the first point will again come to this place. So this is like a huge, great hour hand, you might say, on a cosmic clock, which rotates in 1200 years. And it is this which accounts for this gap, so to speak, between what happens at the astronomical heavenly realm and what then happens on an earthly realm. It's almost as if something is stepped down like a transformer. An impulse is stepped down from the realm of the gods, so to speak, where it is impelled, down into earthly life, where it is reflected. And I would suggest that it is the movements of the Venus pentagram which account for this. So, the age of Aquarius, 3573, a long time in the future. Why is it so important for us to be sure about when the age of Aquarius begins? It's important for what I said when I started, our understanding of our story, the story of ourselves, the story of our country, the story of our planet, of our humanity. George Orwell in 1984 said, "Those who control the past control the future, and those who control the present control the past." If the powers that be tell you what your story has been about, they can also determine how they think your story should go forward into the future. And in a book which I think I mentioned last time, but I'll just mention it again, just in case any of you weren't here then. This American chap who wrote this book called Time, the Familiar Stranger, 1986, J.T. Fraser, very interesting book. He looks at time in all different levels, right from cellular level, right up to the various different calendars that have been used in different cultures. He used a rather militaristic image to talk about time, but although it's a bit militaristic, I think there's some truth to it. He says the people of Earth are at war to decide whose interpretation of the past is going to shape the future of mankind. The ethos that will eventually conquer the minds of people will be the one that succeeds in creating a framework of historical understanding for which a believable and inspiring future for mankind may be constructed. So there's a kind of competition going on, you might say. Yeah? We all know, for example, that for Muslims this is not 2010. They have their own calendar. Same for Jews. The same for Freemasons, in fact. Yeah? The year of Freemasonry is not 2010. There are many different cultures. Even the Japanese are still continuing their own calendar alongside the one that is normally used in the world these days, which came from the West. But you may remember that last time, just to mention one person very briefly, as again an illustration of why this is important, this guy was one of the leading ideologists of the 2012 movement, you might say, Jose Aguilas, American. He's trying really hard to change the calendar. And why? Because he thinks that the calendar of a civilization is primarily responsible for the lifestyle of the citizens of the society, and believes that changing the calendar changes the manner in which people relate to the forces at work in the universe. And he wants to change the calendar to his artificially constructed version of the ancient Mayan calendar. I don't have time to go into all of that now, so I touched on it in the last talk about the Mayan calendar, but basically one of the things he wants to do by doing this is to get rid of the present calendar which we have, which of course, as far as the years go, relates to the birth of Jesus Christ. So by getting rid of the so-called Christian calendar, you get rid of Christianity. This is one of his thoughts. And Aguilas is important because, as I mentioned last time, he's very well connected. Very well connected. He's connected with people high up in the New World Order, in the United Nations. And he's already conducted conferences to try to get the United Nations and the Vatican. A very big conference was held in 1999 in Central America in order to push this forward. Despite the fact that he regards himself as channeling the commands of the galactic leaders of the Galactic Star Council. If you, again, don't take my word for it, just go to his website and see what he says, how he's channeling a being called Dor-Jah-El, from the Galactic Federation. So you look at some of these things that Argylis is saying, you think to yourself, is this guy really with us? Is he really on the planet, you know? But he's had a tremendous influence, and he's made really powerful connections. We can ask ourselves, what's that about? So that's just an illustration of somebody who also believes that it's important that we change our concept of how we look at time. But as far as I'm concerned, I think he's doing it in a completely illusory fashion. So, where are we? When are we? How do you relate to that? How do you relate to being in 2010? What does it mean to you? Our scientific culture tells us that the Big Bang happened X billion years ago, and X billion years in the future, presumably our solar system will encounter heat death. And the Earth and everything else will all be burned up, all our civilization and culture will be irrelevant, and that will be the end of that. As if it never happened, complete meaninglessness. What was the point? This is the picture, the philosophical picture, which natural science has been presenting to us since the 19th century. It's a picture of complete meaninglessness. Even the Richard Dawkinses, all they can come up with in the end is basically, wow, isn't the natural world a wonderful thing? So they have awe, they have reverence, they have interest. But what's it all about, Alfie, is not something they can actually, really address. And sometimes they don't even say it's worth addressing. So we have a bizarre natural scientific picture which tries to see how we get from mollusk to Mozart, how the monkey can get to write Beethoven's symphonies, this familiar image. And you need all these billions of years with this picture because it's a picture based on chance, random chance. So if the monkey's going to write the symphony, the monkey needs billions of years for random natural selection somehow to get us there. This is the picture which we are encouraged in our universities, in our school system, in our science lessons to adopt. And the only way we can kind of escape this picture is through things like Star Trek. Because it's led to an image of where we are completely alone in the universe. And we feel isolated and alone, and we're desperate to find where are the aliens who can keep us company. Can they please come and join us? Yeah. So we are told that we have only one life, of course, amidst all these billions of years. We don't have many lives. We had no life before this life. We will have no lives after this life. There is no spiritual world. There are no gods. There is no Christ. There was no incarnation. So there obviously is no real significance to any particular year or any particular date. That's what we are asked to believe. But it's obviously not the traditional picture. The traditional picture was the cycle of the year, the seasons, the natural cycle, in harmony with the agricultural cycle, yeah? Going from the solstices and the equinoxes, based on that. So that's a cycle, and it constantly repeats. And you find that in cultures all over the world. But in the West, because there was Christianity, there was also a linear aspect. From Eden to the New Jerusalem. From the beginning to the end. From the Alpha to the Omega. So you have two things there in the West. You have the cycle, which was pre-Christian, which people obviously in the Christian culture continued to celebrate with their Christian festivals, which were often metamorphoses of the pagan festivals, but they were continuing in cyclical form. And then you have this drive, this linear drive, from beginning to end. You put that together, and what have you got? A cycle and a line. You have a spiral in a sense. Yeah? So you had both of these consciousnesses in the West in the last 2,000 years. But some people